Book 1, The Blazing Ronin, Wandering Blades. Chapter 11, The Kunoichi's Redemption. Akira led his allies deeper into the shadowed depths of Lord Ito's palace, his emerald katana held at the ready to cut through whatever fresh horrors awaited them. The path ahead had been revealed by the mysterious merchant Toshiro Nakamura, a trail that would lead them straight into the shogun's innermost sanctum. And beyond that, the Ronin could only begin to fathom the ancient, corrupted forces Ito had bound to his will in his mad quest for power and domination. Akira's grip tightened around his sword hilt, the pulsing emerald markings covering his body seeming to flare briefly with ethereal energy. He could sense the weight of destiny pressing down on them all, the inevitability of the coming confrontation. The Ronin's piercing gaze slid to his companions as they advanced. Kaya, her expression hardened with determination despite her trembling sword grip. Kozue, the towering crimson-armored Ravager seeming to swell with anticipation of the glorious battle to come. And finally, Hana, the lithe kunoichi assassin ghosting just ahead, her kama scythes held at the ready as she scouted their path. Despite the woman's reassurances about where her loyalties lay, Akira could not help but feel a lingering sense of unease gnawing at him. If Hana's former lover Katsumi truly was as skilled as the assassin claimed, and still harbored a grudge from their violent falling out years ago, then the Ronin knew their paths would likely cross again before this was over. And he dreaded what that could mean for the fragile cohesion of his allies. As if summoned by his doubts, a strange presence seemed to materialize beside Akira. The young warrior tensed, his katana leading as he turned to face the newcomer, only to find the familiar form of Masaru Tanaka falling into step beside him. "You seem distracted, my friend," the grizzled warrior stated, his deep voice laced with quiet concern. "Though I cannot say I blame you, the miasma of darkness surrounding this place would test even the most hardened soul." Masaru leveled his intense stare at Akira, his next words carrying a heavy weight. "But you must remain focused, Blazing Ronin. For I fear the true challenges still lie ahead of us, ones that may put your convictions and abilities to their utmost test." The young warrior regarded his loyal friend for a moment before giving a terse nod of acknowledgement. Masaru had been by his side since the earliest days of his quest, one of the first to pledge his sword to the path of the Blazing Ronin. If there was anyone Akira could trust to watch his back in the crucible to come, it was the grizzled warrior. Still, he could not help the undercurrent of unease that continued to gnaw at him as his gaze slid to Hana's lithe form up ahead. "Hana," he murmured, keeping his deep voice low. "What do you make of her, Masaru? Of the assassins, convictions regarding where her true loyalties lie?" The grizzled warrior followed Akira's gaze, his expression becoming inscrutable as he studied the kunoichi for a long moment. Finally, he gave a slight shake of his head, his next words laced with trepidation. "I will not mince words, my friend, I do not trust her. Not fully." Masaru leveled his stare at the Ronin, his intense eyes seeming to bore straight into Akira's soul. "Hana has a darkness surrounding her, one that runs far deeper than even she seems to realize. I can sense it, like a miasma clinging to her very essence." The grizzled warrior fell silent for a moment before continuing in a grim tone. "There are regrets there, past transgressions and divided loyalties that could threaten to undermine everything we are trying to accomplish here. You were wise to extract the truth of her falling out with this, Katsumi, from her." Akira felt his brow furrow slightly as Masaru mentioned the name of Hana's former lover and rival. The kunoichi had been incredibly reluctant to divulge the full story behind their violent rift all those years ago. "You seem to know more about this than you let on," the Ronin stated, his deep voice tinged with quiet intensity. "Speak true, my friend, what darkness surrounds Hana that could potentially jeopardize our cause?" Masaru was silent for a long moment, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. Finally, he gave a slow nod and began speaking in a low, measured tone. "The assassin did not simply fall out with her former lover Katsumi all those years ago. There is far more to that story, one that cuts to the very core of who and what Hana was before she joined our ranks. The grizzled warrior's eyes seemed to blaze from within as he leveled his stare at Akira. She was not always a masterless assassin for hire, pledging her blade to whoever could afford her services. No. Hana was once a member of the Crimson Lotus, Lord Ito's personal guard of elite ninja assassins. Akira felt his breath catch in his throat as the weight of Masaru's words washed over him. He opened his mouth to respond when the grizzled warrior pressed on, his voice taking on a harder edge. For years, she served that dishonorable shogun without question or mercy. Carrying out assassinations, sowing terror and chaos across these lands in Ito's name as he steadily amassed more power and influence. Masaru leveled his intense gaze at the Ronin, his next words carrying an unmistakable weight. Hana has more blood on her hands than you could possibly fathom, Akira. Innocent lives snuffed out, all in the name of that corrupt lord's dark ambitions. A tense silence fell over the pair as they continued advancing, allowing the grizzled warrior's proclamation to hang heavy in the air. Finally, Akira found his voice once more, his deep baritone laced with a mixture of intensity and trepidation. If what you claim is true, then how can we trust her commitment to our cause? The Ronin asked quietly. How can I be certain Hana's loyalties truly lie with restoring balance to these lands, and not some deeper, more sinister agenda? Masaru was silent for a long moment before responding, his expression becoming inscrutable once more. That is something only you can judge for yourself, my friend. You have been granted incredible insights into Hana's past and inner demons, insights I could never begin to fathom. The grizzled warrior's eyes seemed to blaze from within as he leveled his stare at Akira. But I would caution you against being too trusting, even of those who have sworn loyalty to your cause. The path of the Blazing Ronin is a treacherous one, and it has ever been the nature of assassins and killers to betray those who presume to have their trust. With those ominous words lingering in the air, Masaru fell silent once more. Akira felt a growing sense of trepidation tightening his chest as his gaze slid back to Hana up ahead. He knew the kunoichi was incredibly skilled, and that her abilities would prove invaluable in the challenges to come. But if even a fraction of what Masaru claimed was true about her dark past in Ito's service. The Ronin's grip tightened around his katana hilt, the pulsing emerald markings covering his body flaring briefly with ethereal energy. He could not afford to let doubts and divided loyalties undermine everything they had accomplished so far. Not with the crucible of Lord Ito's innermost sanctum lying just ahead, and whatever ancient, corrupted forces the shogun had bound to his will. Akira's emerald gaze burned with intensity as he leveled it forward once more. He was the Blazing Ronin, a force of order and redemption powerful enough to cut through even the densest shadows. And soon, he would have a weapon befitting that role, the legendary Munin Musubiran, a katana forged by the Old Ones themselves to channel their incredible energies. Once that blade was in his grasp, Akira vowed, he would be unstoppable. Powerful enough to overcome any ancient evils or personal betrayals that dared cross his path towards restoring balance to these lands. For his legend was only just beginning to burn away the shadows, no matter how dense the darkness or tragic the sacrifices required. Several hours later found the vanguard regrouping in what appeared to be some kind of antechamber or staging area. Akira stood impassively, studying the heavy iron-bound doors that seemed to be the final barrier separating them from Lord Ito's innermost sanctum. He could sense the power, the wrongness radiating from whatever lay beyond like a miasma. The Ronin's emerald gaze slid to his gathered allies, taking in their expressions of grim determination. Kaya, her sword gripped tightly as she tried her best to mask her trepidation. Kozue, the towering crimson-armored Ravager seeming to swell with anticipation of the glorious battle to come. Masaru, the grizzled warrior's intense gaze sweeping their surroundings warily, ever vigilant for any potential threats. And finally, Hana. The lithe kunoichi assassin stood apart from the rest, her kama scythes held at the ready as she studied the iron-bound doors with narrowed eyes. Akira felt his breath catch in his throat as Masaru's ominous words echoed through his mind once more. Hana has more blood on her hands than you could possibly fathom, Akira. Innocent lives snuffed out, all in the name of that corrupt lord's dark ambitions. The Ronin clenched his jaw tightly, forcing himself to recenter and focus on the task at hand. He could not allow doubts or personal demons to cloud his judgment, not here on the precipice of their inevitable confrontation with Ito. You all know what awaits us on the other side of these doors, Akira stated, his deep voice resonating with quiet intensity as he swept his piercing emerald gaze over his warriors. Lord Ito has been awaiting our arrival, no doubt prepared to unleash whatever ancient forces and corrupted allies he has bound to his will. The young warrior's grip tightened around his katana hilt, the pulsing markings covering his body flaring briefly with ethereal energy. We are venturing into the very crucible of the coming battle, my friends. The fires of oblivion itself rage just ahead, fueled by one man's dark ambitions and insatiable thirst for power. Akira held each of their gazes for a long moment, letting the weight of his next words hang in the air. So I will ask you all one final time, are you prepared to walk the path of the blazing Ronin into the heart of this darkness? To brave the flames and emerge on the other side, or be consumed by the inferno entirely? One by one, Kaya, Kozue, Masaru and finally, Hana all gave solemn nods of determination, gripping their respective weapons tightly. Despite the kunoichi's lingering shadows and past transgressions, her expression was unreadable behind her mask. The Ronin regarded them all for one final moment before turning to face the iron-bound doors, leveling his katana towards the barrier as emerald flames erupted across his body. Then brace yourselves, Akira intoned, his deep voice resonating with the weight of destiny itself. For the ashes will be seared from our souls this night. With a resounding boom, the young warrior launched himself forward in a blazing burst of speed. His emerald katana lashed out, shearing through the heavy iron doors in a single vicious arc of searing jade flames. The barriers crumpled inwards with a groan of rending metal, clearing the path into the dimly lit chamber beyond. Akira strode through the smoldering wreckage, his allies falling into step behind him as his piercing gaze swept their new surroundings. They appeared to be in some kind of ceremonial sanctuary or ritual space. The chamber was immense, easily the size of a cathedral with a vaulted stone ceiling supported by intricately carved pillars. Braziers burned with emerald flames, bathing the entire space in an eerie jade glow that cast dancing shadows across the floor. But it was the far end of the chamber that made the Ronin's breath catch in his throat. There, surrounded by a series of archaic runic circles and sigils burned into the very stone, stood the unmistakable form of Lord Ito himself. The shogun was garbed in ceremonial robes, his eyes closed as he seemed to be chanting in a guttural, alien tongue. All around him, Akira could sense the power building, the unmistakable taint of ancient, corrupted forces being summoned forth. Ito, the Ronin shouted, his deep voice echoing through the vaulted chamber. Your transgressions and dark dealings with powers beyond your comprehension end here. The shogun's eyes snapped open at Akira's words, revealing orbs of burning crimson that seemed to glow from within. A cruel smile split Ito's features as he turned to face the vanguard, raising his arms in a sweeping gesture. Ah, the legendary Blazing Ronin, he intoned, his voice taking on a strange reverberating quality that set Akira's teeth on edge. I have been awaiting your arrival, warrior. You and your pathetic allies have provided quite the entertaining diversion as I prepared for this ritual. Ito leveled his burning crimson stare at the Ronin, his next words carrying an unmistakable weight. Did you really think you could stand against me once I had embraced the true power of the old ones? Once I had bound the defiler itself to my will, preparing to unleash its insatiable hunger for destruction upon this world. A shocked silence fell over the chamber as the shogun's proclamation seemed to linger in the air. Akira felt his breath catch in his throat, the blood draining from his face as the true extent of Ito's madness was finally laid bare. He had made a pact with the defiler, the ancient, primordial evil that Nakamura had warned them about. The same insatiable force of chaos and destruction that the old ones had only narrowly managed to imprison thousands of years ago. If Ito succeeded in this ritual, in unleashing the defiler's full power onto the world, You arrogant fool, the Ronin growled, his deep voice laced with quiet menace as emerald flames erupted across his body once more. You have no concept of the forces you are attempting to unleash here, the devastation and ruin that will be wrought. Ito simply threw back his head and laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber like rolling thunder. And you are the deluded one, samurai. Clinging to your outdated notions of honor and balance, you cannot begin to comprehend the power I will soon wield. The shogun's crimson gaze seemed to blaze even brighter as he leveled it at Akira, his next words carrying a dire finality. The defiler will burn this world of the old one's creation to ashes, and from those smoldering remains, I will forge a new empire. One of eternal darkness and oblivion, with me as its one true ruler. With a sweeping gesture, Ito conjured a massive broadsword that seemed to be composed of swirling tendrils of crimson smoke and shadow. He leveled the blade at the vanguard, his burning gaze sweeping over each of them in turn. But first, I will take great pleasure in cutting you and your allies down where you stand, Blazing Ronin. Once your defiant flames have been snuffed out, nothing will remain to oppose the coming oblivion. Akira tensed, bracing himself as Ito seemed to swell with power, the ceremonial chamber trembling around him. The Ronin could sense it now, the unmistakable presence of the defiler itself, an ancient insatiable hunger pressing in on them from all sides. This was it. The crucible he had been destined for, the point of no return on his path as the Blazing Ronin. Akira's emerald gaze slid to his companions, Kaya, Kozue, Masaru, and finally Hana, the kunoichi assassin's eyes burning from within her mask.